Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from the night. And to be honest, there wasn't going to be one of these episodes tonight originally. I didn't have as much time to watch some hoops as I was doing some things with family, and also there were a ton of blowouts. The slate didn't have a lot of stakes on the line, so I thought tonight was going to be one without a video. However, then Luka Doncic decided to have one of the single greatest performances in the history of the sport, and I'm not exaggerating because he put up a stat line we have never seen before, and also the Mavericks mounted one of the single most improbable comebacks that's ever happened on an NBA court. So all that said, we had to make a video tonight. There was no chance I wasn't going to go ahead and talk to y'all. So most of this video is going to be talking about that game in particular. I will give a couple shout outs at the end, but before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. And let's go ahead and talk about Luka Doncic. For the most part, Knicks versus Mavericks was basically like any other game. There were 5 guys on each side of the court. There were coaches, there were fans in the arena. It was being broadcast on television. There were 4 12-minute quarters being played with a halftime in the middle. It was basketball, the beautiful game, the greatest sport of the world in my opinion, and it was fun. It was a pretty solid matchup. They were going back and forth. There was a little bit less on the line than there should have been because Jalen Brunson was supposed to be making his return to Dallas, but he didn't end up playing tonight, and RJ Barrett ended up getting hurt pretty early on. But despite that, the Knicks were still doing pretty well. Emmanuel Quickley had a double-double with points and assists. He was really solid tonight. Julius Randle had a pretty good game. You had some other performances like Mitchell Robinson had a double-double as well. All around, the Knicks got a lot of great performances. Quentin Grimes even had 30 points. But none of this matters because Luka Doncic from the get-go was aggressive. He was on fire. It felt like nobody was going to stop him, as nobody does typically, but he felt like he had another gear in him. And in the fourth quarter, he really turned things up. He would score, I believe, 18 points in the fourth quarter. He was a man on a mission, it felt like. However, despite that, they were down 9 points with about 27 seconds left. And in the NBA, that is an insurmountable odd. You cannot make that comeback. It just doesn't happen. And so I walked away from the TV. I was like, I have to go get ready for this podcast that I do with the Thunder. It's called OKC Topic Thunder. If you want to check that out, if you're a Thunder fan, I'll put a link in the description. Hopefully I remember. But regardless, I had to go get ready for that. So I was like, okay, this game's probably wrapped up. I'll watch some of the other games on the side of my computer while I get ready for this podcast and everything. But this one is basically cooked. However, I then come back to the TV and it's a 3-point game out of nowhere. And it was mainly due to Christian Wood hitting a 3. Quentin Grimes would turn the ball over. Luka hit an and 1 putback. Miles McBride split some free throws. Spencer Dinwiddie drilled a 3 after a Luka pass. It was a lot of things that had to go right for the Mavericks, but they had somehow managed to get it back down to a 3-point game, and they had the ball and they were bringing it up the court. And then the Knicks did something that I absolutely hate, and that's when you foul when you're up 3, because that way the worst they can do theoretically is go to the free throw line, hit a couple of free throws, and you're still up 1. They don't have the chance to make a 3, tied up, and send it to overtime, or at least that's the theory. And yes, it is probably the smart play, but as for someone who is watching as a fan of the game, I hate to see it, and I hope that's something that one day they're able to take out of the rules. It is a smart decision, but as a fan of the game, I hate it, and it ruins a lot of ends to performances, in my opinion. So it happened, I was like, well, damn, we don't have a chance for a Luka Doncic game winner or just to send it to overtime. Or at least I thought, because he makes the first free throw, and the second one he bricks perfectly, so it pops up as a rebound, it's tipped around, and he catches it, and he shoots like a putback mid-range jumper from the elbow, which honestly, he got fouled on. He should have gotten an and 1 to just finish the game there, but I'm so glad he didn't, so he could finish out with the incredible stat line that he had. And this game went to overtime. Luka went off in overtime too, and the Mavericks would end up winning. To give you some statistical context for just how improbable this comeback was, teams in the last 20 years heading into tonight, when they were down by 9 or more points with 35 or fewer seconds left in the game, they were 0-13,884. 13,884 teams had been in that position, and not a single one had come back and won. The Mavericks now make that 1 and 13,884. That's how improbable it was, and that's what makes Luka's game that he had even more impressive. So let's talk about the stat line. Tonight, Luka Doncic had 60 points, 21 rebounds, and 10 assists. It is only the second 60-point triple-double in the history of the sport. There's never been a 60, 20, and 10 game either. He surpasses James Harden, the only other player to have a 60, 10, and 10 game. Unbelievable, absolutely absurd. It is a stat line we have never seen. And additionally, he breaks the record for the Dallas Mavericks in terms of most points scored in a game. Dirk didn't do it, nobody else in their history. It is now Luka who stands alone. He ties the record for the most points in a triple-double, like I said, with 60. 60. It was amazing. It was hard to believe what was happening. But with Luka Doncic, he makes it seem so easy. It felt like it was so in the flow of things. It felt like he was completely in control. Like when most players score 60, 50 points, you're like, oh my God, they're going off. Really didn't even realize how close he was to 60 until they started talking about it and going, oh, he's close to the franchise record for the Mavericks. And then I was realizing exactly what I was witnessing. It was a 60-point triple-double in the making, only the second one ever with the franchise record and one of the most improbable comebacks in the history of the sport. And Luka got this triple-double in his typical way. Crazy behind the back passes where he doesn't even have to look at the guy and it breaks your mind when you're watching it live. Rebounds, he was bowling his way inside, and like we saw in the game-tying shot at the end of regulation, managing to grab offensive rebounds and create opportunities out of nothing. He also had an and one in the end of the fourth quarter too, in that 9-point comeback that also involved him getting an offensive rebound, so he was attacking the glass. And scoring wise, step back threes, mid-range jumpers, bowling his way to the basket like it's nobody's business, and basically making every defender that tried to guard him look foolish on the way to a 66% shooting night while scoring 60 points. To add even more context to this game historically, there's a stat called game score, which you can check out on Basketball Reference, and basically it is supposed to be a single number that can tell you how great a performance was. I don't think it factors in, whether it's in the playoffs or it's in the regular season. It just takes a look at statistically what happened in the game, where does it stack up against the rest of the performances of all time. This Luka game, according to Game Score, is the 6th best game in the history of the sport. He's a little bit behind James Harden. There's Michael Jordan up there too. Kobe's 81, I believe, is also in that conversation. So that's the company that he's in with this performance. This all brings me to my main point that I don't even know if Luka Doncic is human. He's either an alien from a planet where just basketball players are perfected, or he was created in a lab to just dominate the NBA. That's how unbelievable he is. He is 23 years old, putting up stat lines that we have never seen before. And some people are going to be like, oh, stats are inflated. He doesn't have that much talent around him, so he can kind of just do whatever he wants. I don't care. That has been the case for a lot of players over the course of years, but Luka's the only one to ever do it, and he's 23 years old. Do you know how old I am? I'm 22. I turn 23 in this upcoming May. He is about like a year older than me. And he just put up a 60-point, 20-rebound triple-double. That is unfathomable to me. He is in his 5th season in the NBA, and he's now got a franchise scoring record. He's putting up performances we have never seen. He's well on pace to maybe become the all-time leading scorer in NBA history after it's all said and done, depending on where LeBron James ends up and how long he plays. But that is just surreal. He's made all NBA 3 out of his 5 seasons, and it's going to be 4 out of his 5 seasons once this year wraps up. He won Rookie of the Year, of course. He's been an all-star basically every single season. He is saying generational almost feels disrespectful to just how incredible he has been since entering the league. And it is unbelievable to really grasp. I can't really understand just how dominant he is. I am watching one of the future GOATs start his career live in front of me, and it's kind of hard to internalize that because, some people are going to be like, oh, he hasn't had the team success, but he's only 23 years old. He hasn't really had an all-star caliber player next to him for any of his career. Imagine he gets an all-star next to him, or even, God forbid, for the rest of the league, he gets a 3-man trio, big 3, whatever you want to call it, and they go out and dominate the league. They get solid role players. They might be unstoppable because Luka at this point basically already is. He is dragging this roster as far as he can, and with this performance, he continues to try and bully his way into the MVP conversation. The record is never going to be there. They're not going to be one of the top seeds in the Western Conference with this roster. It's just not going to happen. But statistically, what he does on any given night, you have to at least talk about him in the conversation because that's the way it's going to be for basically the entirety of his career as he continues to work his way towards being one of the faces of the league, and eventually one day he's going to be the best that is in the game. He's putting up 60-point triple doubles, and his prime is still probably 5 years away. Imagine what he's going to be doing then. He's going to be dropping like 80, 30, and 25 by the time he reaches his prime. It's going to be absurd to continue to watch him develop and grow because his game has only gotten better and better. He is easily a top 5 player in the league right now. Offensively, you can argue he's top 1, top 2. I can't really believe what I'm watching with him, and it always brings me back to the 2018 draft when he went 3rd overall. DeAndre Ayton's cool for the Phoenix Suns. He's a fine player. Marvin Bagley, looking back, probably one of the worst picks of all time because he's a fine player in Detroit and everything like that. But when you consider the context of the fact that not only did he not work out in Sacramento and he's in a different spot, but the Kings could have had Luka Doncic. He was right there. It wasn't like they had to trade up or anything. He was right there. All they had to do was take him, and they didn't. It's hard to believe when we look back on this like 30 years down the line. Luka's career is over, and NBA historians are like looking back on some of the all-time greats because I think Luka is going to be in that conversation. They're going to look back on the 2018 draft and say, well, first of all, they're going to go, wow, that Gilgeous-Alexander guy was pretty good, but they're also going to say, how did Luka Doncic go 3rd overall? That is going to be one of the biggest question marks in the history of this modern era of the sport. I truly believe that. And so with all this Luka stuff to say, he is incredible. What the Mavericks and him did tonight was unbelievable. I still am kind of struggling to wrap my head around it as I'm telling it to you here in this video. It doesn't feel like it's actually happening, like I'm making this up. But it happened. Luka Doncic had a 60-point, 20 rebound, 10 assist triple-double, the first time that has ever happened in the history of the sport. He shot nearly 70% on the way to doing that, and along the way, the Mavericks also had one of the single most improbable comebacks in the modern era of basketball, all in the same night, all in the same arena, in front of the same fans, and now I'm telling it to you because I can't believe it, and I now have to put it into words, so maybe it sticks in my head. I guess we should also talk about it from the Knicks' perspective, because while the Mavericks had this all-time comeback, the Knicks had this all-time collapse. It was really, really bad. They weren't playing well on shooters. They were, turning the ball over, like I mentioned, not hitting their free throws, just horrible execution down the stretch. And the Knicks have been really good as of late, so I don't want to be too hard on them, but this is bad. If the Knicks were in a position like earlier in the year where they were below 500 and they were losing games, if this game happened during that stretch, I truly believe Tom Thibodeau might be fired tomorrow. But because they've been winning, I think they'll figure things out. I think they'll still be okay. They'll say, we didn't have Brunson, we didn't have RJ Barrett for most of the game, we still had some good performances, and it wasn't like they, lost in regulation. They got to overtime, and it really was just a player, one of the greatest players in the game right now, just absolutely unstoppable, so they can kind of fall back on all that. But if you're a Knicks fan, and I was listening to some Knicks fans in a Twitter space earlier, they were an absolute shambles. But if you're a Knicks fan, please let me know how you feel about this game, because I'm very interested to know. To give some quick shout outs to the rest of the league, in Celtics versus Rockets, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown had a monster performance. Tatum had 38, 8 and 4, while Jaylen Brown dropped 39 points, 1 rebound, and 2 dimes. They're pretty comfortably in that conversation for the best duo in the league. I think it's like them, KD and Kyrie, and LeBron and Anthony Davis at the moment are the 3 that I would go to. You could also maybe throw like Joel Embiid and James Harden in that conversation too. There are a lot of great duos, but the fact that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are probably most people's pick to be the best duo in the NBA speaks a lot to their growth as young players. They are the centerpiece of this squad, although there are a lot of great supporting guys around them. But the fact that for a while, a lot of people tried to break up this duo. They said it's not going to work. They don't really fit together. They've got to trade one or the other. And now they're playing as one of the best duos in the league. Most people would probably say that they are the best duo in the league. It's just super cool to see, and it speaks to how much you've got to let young talent grow, gel, and build that chemistry before you really judge it. On the Rockets side of things, they got 50 points combined from Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green, another duo that has slowly been starting to build chemistry. Still not super in on Kevin Porter Jr. as Jalen Green's backcourt partner for the future. Maybe it's James Harden, according to some rumors, but all in all, pretty good performance from them too. Speaking of James Harden, he and Joel Embiid Sixers lost to the Wizards tonight, snapping their 8-game win streak. The Wizards were led by Kristaps Porzingis, who had 24 and 10. He had 19 points from Bradley Beal, 14 from Rui Hachimura, and 14 from Kyle Kuzma. Just all around pretty good performance from the Wizards, who have been really bad as of late. They kind of needed this one to maybe build some momentum. And as for the Sixers, Embiid had 48 points and 10 rebounds, another crazy scoring game for another one of the league's top 3 scorers at the moment. James Harden had 26 points, 13 rebounds, and 7 dimes. Tobias Harris had 15 points. It was just not much overall from the supporting cast outside of those 3 guys, which they need a bit more of. They had a chance to maybe tie this one towards the end, but all in all, just was a little bit too late. And finally, the Clippers blew out the Toronto Raptors. They're led by Paul George, who had 23, 7 and 5. You had 20 from Reggie Jackson, 22 from Norman Powell, who has really turned things up as their 6th man, really pushing his way into the 6th man of the year conversation. You had 15 points, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists from Kawhi Leonard, and 23 points and 16 boards from Zubats. He was completely dominating the interior defense of Toronto, and the Clippers have really found their stride outside of that loss to the Sixers a few days ago. They've been winning pretty consistently, having really good performances. There still are some question marks for them here and there. Sometimes they'll get big leads and start to collapse. They're pretty good at playing from behind, but they kind of get a little bit too complacent, which you definitely don't want to see for a team that a few years ago blew a 3-1 lead in a series. So I think that is an issue they need to figure out. But for the most part, they're starting to look more and more like the contenders I thought they would be. Then, as usual for Toronto, Pascal Siakam was carrying with 36 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 dimes. OG Anunoby had 18 points. Scotty Barnes had a crazy stat line of 17 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 dimes. But you got just 4 points from Fred VanVleet, who continues to be one of the most disappointing players this season. He's coming off an all-star berth last year as an undrafted player, which is very, very rare. And it was just this incredible story of him finally winning an all-star appearance. He's one of the best players on a team that shocked the world and made the playoffs pretty convincingly last season. However, it has not been a great sequel for him. And all in all, he's got to be better for Toronto to really find some wins. So with that being said, that's all I've got for y'all tonight. Make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. And comment down below letting me know where you think Luka will finish all time in scoring, and where do you have him right now in the NBA? Is he the best player in the league? Is he top 3, top 5? Or maybe you're even lower on him and you think he's top 10, which in that case, you are kind of crazy. Appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real One Safe back.